Welcome to Branching Out, Growing Together, the podcast that brings you inspiring stories from people ready to take bold steps, grow new opportunities, and transform their land or careers into something extraordinary. Hosted by Melanie Jones, each episode features farmers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries sharing their journeys of discovery and growth. Whether you're dreaming of starting your own farm or looking for new ways to cultivate success, you're in the right place. It's time to branch out and grow together.
Welcome back to Branching Out, Growing Together. I'm your host, Melanie Jones, and today's episode is one I've been really excited to share with you. My guest is Brett Hundley of Agroforestry Partners, an investment fund doing something genuinely unique, planting trees on American farms to rehabilitate soils that have taken a beating from over 2 centuries of conventional agriculture. And they're doing it by building partnerships across the entire value chain, from investors and farmers to tree management companies and downstream buyers. Now, if you grow chestnuts, you might be wondering, are these guys our competition? It's a fair question, and Brett gives a refreshingly honest answer that I think will stick with you. If you've been curious, skeptical, or both about where large-scale agroforestry fits in the future of American chestnuts, this episode is worth your time. And now, here's my conversation with Brett Hundley.
Good morning, Brett. Thank you so much for joining the Branching Out, Growing Together podcast today.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to dive right in because I've received this question from quite a number of people. And that basically is, what is Agroforestry Partners? Is it a farm, a fund? Is it a management team? I think our listeners would really like to hear you kind of walk through what it is, what it does, and who it serves.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate that question. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is we're a little bit of everything, actually. I mean, I would argue that the partners part of our name is actually the most important element of what we're doing. There's that proverb about how if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. We want to go far. And because of that, we partner with a lot of different entities to accomplish our goals. Agroforestry Partners itself is an investment fund. We were set up to rehabilitate American soils that have really come under duress from the conventional farming practices that we've put in place over the past 250 years.
Yep.
And so we do our work by planting trees on farms. Trees and their root structures are incredibly valuable for the protection and regeneration of soils, but they cost a lot of money to plant and manage. So we partner with investors to fund that work. Once we have the money, we need farmland. So we partner with one of the largest agribusinesses in the world to identify farmers in their network interested in doing this work. Once we have the money in the land, we partner with tree management companies to buy, plant, and manage the tree systems that we put into those farms alongside the existing farmers that are in place. And then finally, the personnel inside the investment fund, we also partner with companies downstream to buy the products that'll be coming off our agroforestry systems so that we can provide a proper return to investors and farmers for participating in this work. So, the partners part of our name isn't just a kitschy phrase. We partner with everyone across the entire value chain to implement and execute on the work that we want to do.
Wow, that is a fantastic description, and I think it's going to be helpful to a lot of people to hear that. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics today, but if a listener is sitting here thinking, so are you a competitor? Are you a supporter? Are you trying to help the chestnut industry in the context of this podcast come along? How would you answer that?
Yeah. If I'm being honest, I'd say we're both. We're naturally a competitor we're also a supporter, or a partner, to reuse that word again. I view us as, even though there's a competitive element, we're selling chestnuts just like anyone else, but I view us as much more of a partner when you consider the sales strategy that we have in place. So every tree crop that we put in the ground has a strategy behind it. So for the chestnuts that we've planted in Kentucky, we did a lot of research ahead of time on current market dynamics, the forward market opportunity. The data that we monitor suggests that the US chestnut market is almost 20 million pounds today. Roughly 7 million pounds of that are imported. So there's a huge opportunity to displace those imports with new US production. Um, and then when you think about where chestnuts are sold in the US today, we believe that almost half of total supply goes direct to consumer. The other half goes direct to other businesses like retail, grocery, or food service operators. Agroforestry Partners is focused on the business to business part of the market, that B2B market, and we want to grow it meaningfully, just given our size on the ground in Kentucky. So I guess my quick answer is, we're a competitor, but we're more of a competitor against Italy or China. And we're a competitor, hopefully, that's going to open up new product opportunities that don't even exist today. So that to me ends up kind of being more of a partner, in the longer term, to existing growers. And by the way, I would say, it's absolutely in our best interest to grow the market. Our survival depends on it.
Mhm.
So to be fair and be honest, I think we're a competitor and a supporter. But our goal is, if we find success ourselves, that means that the entire industry will have been supported, and will grow over time to allow even better conditions that are in place today.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, in a sense, a lot of chestnut growers are competitors with each other, and I think we are working hard right now in a lot of different lanes to kind of bring people together instead of working in silos. So I think you're just taking a leading edge with bigger money behind what you're doing. But the goal, I think, is for all of us to have more of a growth mindset and an expansion mindset, not only to replace imports, but to educate Americans about this great food source and the ability to give back to our land, which is, like you said in the beginning, very, very important.
I think
Um,
that's such a great point. With where the industry is today in its growth cycle, we are not a mature, duopoly or oligopoly that is fighting hard with each other, and taking cutthroat actions to undermine each other. This is still a nascent industry, and when you consider the ability of the pie to expand, multiple times over in the coming years and decades ahead, we are competitors, but at the end of the day, we're supporting each other in the industry in a way that this should grow for everybody and be advantageous for everybody.
yep. Yeah, inclusiveness is important right now in our growth.
Yep.
But the next thing here is, listeners that don't know you might be thinking, well, who is Brett? So you came out of investment banking, which is obviously very, very different from farming. And I was curious, what drew you to agroforestry, and how has your background in finance helped with the mission ahead of you?
Yes. So you're correct. I was in investment banking for the better part of 20 years. I was what was referred to as a sell side equity analyst. And so I worked for investment banks, covering the food and agriculture industries. That was the industry that I was responsible for analyzing. And then I would advise big mutual funds and hedge funds on which stocks to buy and sell, in that industry, food and agriculture. So I got to know food and ag really well. And I also got to know the investment world, capital markets, really well. And so I made a lot of relationships within the investment world and also within food and agriculture. After almost 20 years, I'd been looking to exit investment banking. It was a very fulfilling career and it taught me a wide skill set, but I was increasingly interested in sustainability and nature related work. And oddly enough, one of my old clients from the investment banking world had started Agroforestry Partners and needed someone to run the day-to-day operations of the fund. And I jumped at that opportunity just given how my interest in nature and sustainability could line up with, investment fund management, and actually executing some of that nature positive or nature forward work on the ground. So it was literally a dream job for me.
Yeah, for sure.
And it just really lined up well, um, given that the team here needed someone that knew food and agribusiness, and also could complement that with understanding the inner workings of an investment fund, knowing how to talk to both investors, people in the investment community, and people in the food and ag world.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you like to plant things?
I do. So I've been I'm becoming more successful than I was last year and certainly 5 to 10 years ago. It's I was gonna make a joke about how I understood food and agriculture um, from a high level really well because of my analyst days. Uh, Agronomy, not as much. So
Yeah.
that's been a learning curve for me over the past 15 to 20 years, and it's been something that I've been really able to lean into now with agroforestry partners. And so I'd say over the past 3 to 4 years, I'm getting better at planting things in the ground.
Yeah, that's good. And I think you're not alone. There's a lot of people coming from other careers that are saying planting things is important for the earth and it's fulfilling, and it has some balance, but it's not necessarily easy, which is a great segue to the next question. So for what you're doing right now, you could have gone in many directions as far as trees. So
Mhm.
why chestnuts? What made the economics, the environmental profile, I guess, and the market potential attractive to you?
Yep, that's a fair question. So we came at it, I would say more indirectly. We didn't we didn't force chestnuts in the sense that we set up the fund uh, around that tree species. It was more, we knew we wanted to rehabilitate American soils. We knew we wanted to operate in the eastern part of the country, in rain-fed areas. Um, and we knew initially, based on some of the work that we were, some of the landscaping work that we were doing with our large agribusiness partner, that we had a potential opportunity in Appalachia, um, Ohio, Kentucky, Western Virginia, parts of Tennessee, and down into the Mid-South. We knew we had an opportunity to work there, convert some uh, conventional farmland over to these agroforestry systems and do so at a relatively attractive price that we could make the economics work for our investor set, for the farmers and landowners that we would be working with on the ground. And so all of that kind of came together and we sat down and said, okay, based upon this regional focus area to start, what tree crops might work well here. And given the soils that were in place, the pH levels and the soil profiles, sloping of the farms that we were looking at, um, chestnut trees kind of rose to the top as an attractive opportunity for us, just from like what I'll call like an environmental standpoint. And then once we continue to do work on the economic profile of chestnut trees, we got incrementally more excited
Yep.
about using this tree. And then finally, I would say once we understood the um, the point in which the chestnut industry sat here in the U.S., we started to get really excited about the potential to build this into a bigger industry, and not come in a way where we would be um, um, taking or placing wild bets in an already well-established market. We wanted to come in and uh, be a leader in the industry to expand it in a way where we would, be a rising tide that lifted all boats over time. So everything just seemed to work out, whether it was um, the ecological profile, the economics behind the tree, uh, and then the forward industry or market opportunity. It all seemed to come together where we felt very confident that we could take an initial swing with chestnut trees. And so we contracted with some nurseries in place. We're able to get, 1,600 acres of land with our initial demonstration farmer. And you know, we took a chance on chestnut trees and put a good team around this first project to make sure that we'll be successful.
Yeah, that's a lot of acreage.
Yes.
Um, but again, kind of going back to listeners that might be still hesitant about what your actions could do to the market. You just got back from Chile and you were visiting a co-op that sends 90% of their fresh chestnuts to Europe and 10% to the United States,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Uh,
that's correct.
so does that make you feel more or less confident about the opportunity we all have here in the United States with the chestnut?
Oh yeah, I'm more confident. I think it just shows that um, the U.S. remains such a nascent market full of opportunity. I mean, this group that we visited in Chile, um, they very badly want to come into the U.S. market, but there just isn't enough institutional demand here yet for them, relative to the scale that they have locally in Chile and the institutional demand that they need to package and sell their product. It exists in Europe because Europe is a more mature market, and so they chase that demand in Europe. But they very much told me that they would love to sell into the U.S. market, and they see real opportunity here. There just isn't enough institutional demand for them to come here yet. So that reinforced to me that we're onto something here at Agroforestry Partners, and that we have a huge opportunity collectively here in the U.S. to build a bigger industry.
Yes, 100%. And I retired recently from a lifetime of corporate sales. And so when we first entered into this business, I saw that like the opportunity to develop these channels over time is really exciting. But right now, there's not enough supply to, focus on that too much. It's more of the standardization and supply chain and all that. So again, for the newer growers, this is a business that will evolve over the next 10, 20, 30 years with all kinds of fun opportunities, not only to be a grower and sell a product, but to contribute to creating something in the United States. Um, but there's still, this idea of there's an elephant in the room and a threat to small growers. And I'm keying on this in several different ways because I know it's out there. But the growers might be saying, hey, if you start to have these thousands of acres of chestnuts coming online, you'll flood the market, you'll drive prices down, and they've worked for a long time to establish, pricing, and then maybe even build a closed system that leaves them out.
Mm.
What do you think about that?
Yep. Uh, well, I mean, I understand the fear. Like that's a fair statement that you just made, and it's a legitimate concern. Um, I guess I would answer by I guess I would answer by first saying, let's think about go back to how chestnuts are sold today in the US. We think about half is sold D2C, direct to consumer. Um, Agroforestry Partners does not want to sell into that channel D2C. That's just not a viable opportunity for us. And then when I spoke about that 6 or 7 million pounds of imports, we do want to displace imports. So I'd say, if you're a Chinese or Italian grower listening, we're coming for you. We want to displace you here in the U.S. market. Um, and related to that, I mean, we have received good feedback from big retail buyers in the U.S. here that they want to get their product locally, domestically, instead of abroad. They just haven't been able to do so yet because no one operates at their required scale here in the U.S. Until Agroforestry Partners came along.
Yeah.
So I do.
I think that, but also, I'm on the board of Chestnut Growers of America, and we're really trying to put some effort into modernization and bringing people together. So you're doing great work and you will continue to, but I think the industry through organizations like that is also going to help round people up so that we can have standardization and we can sell at scale and really work together. There's a lot of things that have to happen, but I think we're united on that vision.
Yes, I totally agree. I think you're spot on. That was kind of where I was leading, and I'm glad you said that because I think when you consider the B2B channel, right? Like we as a business selling directly to other businesses, whether it's retail, grocery, food service operators, or consumer packaged goods companies that might use chestnuts as an ingredient in their own formulations. There's such an opportunity to drive interest and demand there. And we agroforestry partners, there as that demand gets built, I think there's going to be more opportunity for those of us upstream to come together, build that institutional supply that can meet that new institutional demand downstream. And whether it's partnering with someone like us, Agroforestry Partners, or other existing growers banding together on their own and building that institutional supply, I think there's going to be huge opportunity in the years and the decades ahead to build something a little bit different than it exists today, meet a much larger demand base, and actually have not only prices go up from here, hopefully, but build in multi-year contracts of demand to give growers longer term visibility than they might have today on selling their supply. And I'm just very hopeful that as we build B2B going forward, that it's just going to add a lot of certainty and even better price dynamics for existing growers relative to today.
That's good because I think that some folks have heard you or people related to you talking about prices coming down. You don't necessarily say that that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I will be, I mean, I want to be honest and say that at least in my life, nothing has been linear, nothing's been a straight line. I wish sometimes it were, but I expect there to be variability in pricing. But I think our job is to have a trend line over time that is rising and not falling. And that even though there might be variability year to year, we're building an increasing trend line across US prices for chestnuts. And we're also building in certainty of demand from large institutional buyers that I think will support the overall market as well. So that's important to me, is building in a higher trend line of pricing and building in larger demand commitments from big institutional buyers.
Yeah. And that's beneficial to anyone growing chestnuts because it just lifts the boat higher.
Yes.
Okay. So here's a different topic. Who's managing your orchards and how do you guarantee quality? I think that's a real concern in the grower community, not just related to Agroforestry Partners, but this whole idea of starting to aggregate chestnuts and the supply chain and what actually happens. So in your environment, like what does that experience look like? Who are you relying on? And what are you going to do to make sure that we don't create problems by this really quick growth, I would say?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I'll go back to I think the first question that you asked, and my answer based around partners and how important they are for us. So when you think about my business partner or me inside the investment fund, our backgrounds are in investment banking and investment management. So we are not going to be out there uh, managing chestnut trees, nor should we. We're not going to be out there um, selling, harvesting and selling chestnuts, nor should we. Um, and so we're going to rely on a partner set to make sure that we're executing at each part of the value chain. So uh, let's start upstream in that part of the value chain based around farming, managing these trees and caring for them. Uh, we we currently lean on um, two entities for that. So the first is our farmer on the ground. He has a conventional farming background, which is actually very helpful uh, when you're planting and managing chestnut trees at scale. So he's in the fields every day, managing the alleyways, mowing, identifying areas of concern from an agronomic standpoint. He's been an incredible advocate and important partner for us on the ground from that standpoint. And then we also overlay on top of him a company called Resource Environmental Solutions. Res has a long-standing history in ecological restoration and natural setting management. They know many different types of tree species really well, and they have long-standing, vast experience managing ecological systems around the entire country. And importantly, they work on a very local basis. So they have a local team in Kentucky that we work with on soil testing, tree pruning and management, um, uh, nutrient application, et cetera. So Res is able to work in tandem with our farmer on the ground to make sure that we're properly caring for the tree systems. And then as we get to tree harvest, you mentioned Chile. Our farmer and I recently went there to learn how they harvest their nuts at scale, how they clean and process them. There were a lot of learnings that we took from that trip. And then further downstream in the value chain, identifying buyers, processing nuts, and selling nuts. We recently signed a memorandum of understanding with Red River Foods, who is one of the largest nut traders and processors in the world. And they're going to be incredibly valuable to us in the sense of uh, uh, processing and sizing our nuts, working through the appropriate um, um, uh, packaging methods, and then selling into the marketplace, given their relationship base across retail, grocery, food service, and consumer packaged goods. They're going to be a vitally important partner for us on making sure that we sell high quality product into the market.
Okay. Yeah, and you can start to see, all right, let's say that you all come up with standards for your chestnut sizing and quality standards and so forth. Well, we need to do that across the entire sphere and community of chestnut growers. So I think that's another thing that Chestnut Growers of America wants to tackle, and along with your efforts too. It really is going to take all of us to say if I say a large nut is X number of nuts per pound, we want most sellers to say the same thing, so that we're like other industries, which I'm sure you know a lot about this. But um, okay, I
Can I
think
say
that,
one more? Can I say one more? That's a great
yeah,
point, Melanie.
yep,
Is I think we have we do have good existing structures in place, specifically across chestnuts, advocating for chestnuts. And I think to the point you brought up, those organizations with all of us together will expand and pivot and evolve over time. And I think that'll be important because the chestnut industry does need a trade association, so to speak, to advocate on our behalf, not only domestically as it relates to some of the items and areas you just mentioned, but also internationally.
yep.
Every part of U.S. agriculture that I've ever studied absolutely 100% requires on exports and international demand. American agriculture is nothing without international demand. And so while we need advocates for the industry here in the US, we also very much need advocates for the industry abroad as well.
Yeah, and if you look at this through that lens, you go, well, why would anyone be worried? We need to produce so many chestnuts in this country, just lots and lots, and we need the standards to help the smaller growers. Maybe they have 50 acres. That's still a revenue potential if we can work this out correctly. So I'm, for one, am super excited, and that's why at Chestnut Growers of America, I said, yes, I'll join the board if I can have growth in my title, because otherwise it's an organization it's time to progress. And I just want to put a plug in here. Within the next couple of weeks, a whole new website and interface for growers is coming out for Chestnut Growers of America. So be on the lookout, listeners, and we want everyone to join because we want to hear everyone's voice. So that's my plug. Um, Okay, the next one is something that maybe many people don't really understand, and that is the idea of you all leasing land versus purchasing land. So you're leasing land rather than buy it. So walk us through kind of the economics and the philosophy of that.
For sure. Maybe to back up just slightly. So if you evaluate a lot of the farmland and real asset investment funds that are out there in the marketplace today, any vehicle that pulls money from investors and invests in farmland or other types of real estate, they usually do so by buying the land away from the farmer or the landowner, making some type of changes or improvements to it, and then eventually selling the land for a premium. So the investors are the ones that get the premium related to the value enhancement. It was important for us to come to market as what's called an impact fund, wanting to have positive impact in the world. Most of the time that's associated with positive ecological or environmental impact, and that's certainly a big mission for us. But we also wanted to have a positive social impact too, or a positive community impact. And so for us, leasing the land was important in that regard because it kept the farmer or the landowner along for the ride for that
Yeah.
value creation that we're executing on the ground, so that eventually way down the road, when that farmer or landowner decides to sell that land, if that farmer or landowner decides to sell that land, they will realize a premium from the work that we've done, and they will have benefited from the work that we've done. So that was really important. Um, the other side of that I'll say too is there's also a capital efficiency component for us. So the other reason that a lease model was attractive was when we raise a bunch of money up front from investors, we don't want to just go spend that all on farmland. It costs a lot of money to buy an acre of land. We'd much rather put it into trees and execute on our mission of rehabilitating soils. So, if $100 comes in the door, rather than put it into land, we'd rather put as much of that $100 as possible into trees. And so our land lease model allows us to save some money up front. We lease a portion of the land, secure access to it, and then we're able to put a greater amount of dollars into buying trees, planting trees, and affecting that change on the ground that we're after. So that was important for us too. The last thing I'll just mention is the land lease model is also attractive to farmers and landowners, not only because it keeps land in their possession or keeps the title with them, but also it smooths out their earnings. You know, when you consider these corn or bean farmers that we're talking to, generally across a crop cycle, they'll earn anywhere from break even to $300 an acre in profit, but it swings wildly over that crop cycle. And for us to come in and give farmers anywhere from $100 to $300 an acre every single year for a 20-year lease term, it's very, very attractive to them because they know they're getting a certain amount every year. It's replacing that income volatility that they see on a year-to-year basis. And they know that valuable improvements are being undertaken on their ground that are going to improve their land value over time.
So after 20 years, say the lease is up, do you all just walk away? I guess you try to renegotiate it, but in theory, would a farmer inherit 20, how many acres with trees on it now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are multiple avenues that we can take after 20 years. In our contract with the landowner or the farmer, we have the ability to just re-up for another 20 years if that's in the best interest of all parties. Um, the farmer or the landowner can also acquire the trees or the projects themselves at that point, because again,
Okay.
when we
Yeah.
go in and sign that lease, the land stays with the farmer or the landowner, but Agroforestry Partners controls the trees, or we own the trees and all of their physical and ecological production. So after those 20 years, the farmer or the landowner will have an income producing asset on their land that they can buy back from us. Or we collectively, we and the farmer landowner could sell the project to another third party that could run it besides Agroforestry Partners. So there's a lot of different ways that we
Yeah,
can.
that's cool. That's super interesting. Now they don't really get a percentage of the revenue from the chestnuts. They're getting their lease payments. Is that right?
So yes, they have the choice to either accept a lease payment across the full term for 20 years, or they can forego the lease payment and start to share in revenue at year 7. And so it's really just up to them whether they want that annual income or the revenue share over time.
Okay. I went a little deep on that just because we may have people listening that are kind of interested in this concept. So
Yeah.
that's good. Well, you just mentioned year 7. So we know that chestnuts for significant yield is 7 to 9 years, something like that. I guess you don't need to keep the farmers too motivated if they're getting a lease payment on their land, right? They're getting checks. So
Yes, our farmers in Kentucky, they decided to go with the annual lease payments, and they're quite happy receiving that check every January. And yeah, it's their choice, but that's currently what our farmers in Kentucky have chosen.
yeah, especially since you're newer at it, that
Yep.
does, that makes sense. Is there anything that you saw in Chile that has, you said we might have made a mistake there or just better processes in the future?
Yes, we learned a ton, and the group that we visited were fantastic. They were very open about what they've learned across their decades of farming chestnuts in Chile. It's a great question. I would say two things probably. So the first was the importance of pruning. One of the first farms that we visited um, was about 100 acres, and that particular farmer um, had not pruned as much as he would have liked, and he was open about that. And so the trees were very much on top of each other, and you could tell, especially as we went through the following days of harvest observation there, you could tell that his production was not as robust as other fields that we had seen that were better pruned. And so I think that was a really important learning for us that tree pruning is critical, especially early on, and then up through maturity. It's really critical, and so that was something that we knew we had to sharpen our pencils on going forward. And I would say the other important learning for us was just related to machinery. Um, I, I don't know that I would call it a mistake, but just it was a really important learning for us seeing the different types of machines that they used on different fields. Some were slower than others because they were hybrid machines that tried to do, sweeping, vacuuming, and separation all in one. Whereas other fields that we were able to observe had dedicated machines uh, for sweeping and vacuuming, and a lot of the separation, the nut separation from burrs and cleaning would happen inside a dedicated building away from the elements. And I thought that was a really important learning for us, especially with 1,600 acres. If we have 4 to 6 weeks to get the job done, especially in a more chaotic climate world, uh, where it might rain hard for 2 or 3 weeks, we need to be as quick and efficient as possible in the fields. And so I think getting a better understanding for more efficient, faster moving machines in the field relative to slower hybrid machines that we're able to observe, that was a really important learning for us as well.
Okay. Um, we may be able to share some of this information through our email, or we'll figure that out later, but you know you're willing to share. I didn't prepare this question, but just curious, why do you think that they were so open to inviting you down to see everything in their operations?
Yeah. Uh, I think so. Well, the the just like human nature part of me that believes most people are good people. I think they're proud of what they've been able to accomplish over time, and they want to show it off, and they want to help entities like ours that are newer to the game, and just good human nature, right? Goodwill, trying to help others. I think that was part of it. And then I think there was a selfish component that I say tongue in cheek, where they don't sell as much product into the US market as they'd like. And they know that there's potential partnership opportunities with us down the road to complement our seasonal production with their own counter seasonal production into the US market, especially as we build hopefully a broader, more valuable market in the US here over time.
Terrific. I think I'd like to give a quick shout out to that same spirit of sharing with the Millers at Route 9, CGI with their co-op in Michigan, Scott Smith, also in Michigan, and others that have just invited some of the newer growers to see what they're doing. And that's that collective spirit that I hope we see grow. And I think that was really cool that they did that.
And we
Um,
welcome that, whether it's in Chile or here in the US in a place like Michigan or Ohio or Iowa, elsewhere. A lot of the existing growers that we've spoken to, we can't thank them enough for sharing what they've learned over time, and helping to guide us and helping us to escape some pitfalls that they might have experienced over time. We're here to learn. We are open about that, we know what we know what we don't know, and we want to make sure that we execute going forward, not only for ourselves, but for the industry as a whole. And we're sincere about that.
yeah, I get that. Let's talk about de-risking a few things. So you talked about the MOU with Red River Foods. You've got that in place, and I know you were pretty excited about it before you've really had a significant harvest. Why was it important, or why is it important to have those things in place now?
Yes. So, I mean, our first commercial harvest is slated for 2029. We have some great genetics in place where we're already starting to see some nut production each fall. And so we have some harvests leading up to 2029 that I think we'll be able to play with. And we'd like to properly execute on the ground, picking those nuts up and getting them into the marketplace so that when 2029 rolls around, we have orders and contracts in place, and we're a well-oiled machine to get that production into the market. I think for an entity like Red River Foods, this agreement was so important because we knew that we needed a further processor, and we knew that we needed real relationships downstream that we could leverage in having conversations to purchase a significant amount of volume that we're going to have in coming years. And Red River was really important from that standpoint because they have existing sales relationships with all the biggest consumer packaged goods companies, retail grocers, and food service operators. And so they're able to make those connections and enable those conversations for us where we can talk about the production that we're going to have and the products that we're interested in selling. The other key piece is Red River has leaned into processing more recently, and they're looking for new tree nut crops to process and fill their own capacity. And so they're very interested in chestnuts and the long-term opportunity that that presents to them as a further processor. And just given their global footprint, they're able to kind of help front run with our own production on testing chestnut production around the world to meet uh, uh, existing or initial demand, I'll say, here in the US. And then as Agroforestry Partners grows with our own production, as some of our peers in the US grow with their own production, Red River can pivot from supplying that production or those sales elsewhere into using domestic American production into an expanding sales base here in the US. So they're a critical partner for developing demand, feeding that demand potential, and then helping all of us execute on our increasing production and new sales here in the US.
Yeah, and that is super exciting for all growers. We have to have the mindset that it's not just agroforestry partners. You might have signed that, but it's representing the path that we are on to go forward to increase what the chestnut does in the United States. And we just have to have a little faith on that, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And Red River was very clear with us when we signed our MOU that they're not getting into this just to procure supply from agroforestry partners. They're getting into this so that we can introduce them to other growers, so that they can make sure that they have enough supply coming in to meet what they and we think will be a very large expanding demand base.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just one more time to say it's going to be so important that all of us work together on standardization and aggregation and how all that looks in the next 5 years. So we'll revisit that. But I have another topic here I think listeners will be kind of excited about, which is you were telling me about building an insurance agency from scratch for chestnuts. And tell us about that, and maybe also why from scratch instead of trying to go to some other insurance agency and convince them that chestnuts is a crop that should be insured.
Sure. So when we set up our fund and pulled in our first tranche of money, our investor base was clear that it wanted to see some type of insurance or risk mitigation product in place for covering the chestnut trees that we put in on the ground. And our lead farmer in Kentucky was also clear that he would like to see some type of insurance coverage to protect what he was putting down on the land that he farms. So we knew that we had to go out and find some type of coverage. We've done a lot of work on evaluating our options in the market, and frankly, there just really aren't many good existing options to protect chestnut trees and their annual production. The federal government offers some products that could potentially be used to cover chestnut trees, but um, they don't. They're not the greatest options for us, and they can be a bit bureaucratic as far as obtaining that coverage. We looked at parametric insurance coverage, which could be tailored really well for covering chestnut trees, but it's very expensive. And to get to really the nature of your question, everywhere we turned for looking into insurance coverage for these trees, it was either too expensive or there was going to be too many hoops to jump through, or it was going to take too much time to get the coverage in place. And so we eventually just settled on creating what's called our own captive insurance agency, which to start is relatively attractive from a price standpoint, and it also offers good multi-peril coverage on our chestnut trees and their annual nut production. And we kind of just said, look, if no one else is going to do this or the product doesn't exist, we're going to have to create it ourselves. So we're in the process of creating this captive agency. To start, it'll be fully purposed on covering our own 1,600 acres of chestnut trees in Kentucky. But once we get our legs under us and get enough reserve in place, financial reserves in place, we're going to look to take that product out to the marketplace and help others, whether it's in chestnut trees or other agroforestry systems, properly protect their assets on the ground and their operations to give that risk mitigation option to people.
Yeah. What a fun thing, creating, innovating. I mean, it's just a privilege for all of us to have those elements in our business models. And that particular one is so needed, and probably have 100 customers in 10 minutes when
Oh,
you open the door.
yeah, I'm
Um,
really excited about it. It's needed out in the market.
yeah, for sure. This is what I'm going to do because this is going a little long and I still have more questions. So I'm thinking we might create a part two. But before we go, I just wanted to see, like, what is your vision 30 years out from now? What do you see in the US and chestnuts?
Uh, 30 years out from now, I mean, I hope we're multiple hundreds of millions of pounds being produced here in the US. When you look at competing nut types out in the marketplace, whether it's, pistachios, walnuts, almonds, peanuts might be the holy grail because they have peanut butter. I think chestnuts need to find our chestnut butter out in the marketplace, whatever that product is. But if we all work collectively to expand market demand, like I think, whether it's whole fresh chestnuts, packaged chestnuts, or using chestnuts as an ingredient, this is a market that can support many hundreds of millions of pounds when you do the market analysis. And so it's my hope that we have tens of thousands of acres in the ground in the US and multiple hundreds of millions of pounds of demand out in the marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, we have to dream, we have to walk in the direction of our vision and our dreams, and why not? So for listeners, if you're new to this, even established, I mean, there's just so much growth to take place, and it takes all of us. I say that a lot because it really does. We all have different ideas and skill sets and connections and relationships. So we're going to do a part two, Brett, and we can talk about a subject I love, which is data, operational efficiency, equipment, so many other things. But for today, let's just call this a wrap. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to part two.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Branching Out, Growing Together. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more inspiring stories and expert tips. Join us next time and keep branching out.